Okay, good evening, Mr. O'Grady. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order at 6:02. Please let the record show that we are missing one planning commissioner, Bob Prendergast, tonight. And I understand he might be joining us a little late. With that, I will ask for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll move into oral communications. Mr. O'Grady, do you have anything? Okay. No other slips?
No.
Okay. I can't see with all the people out there. It's difficult. Okay, changes to the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda tonight?
Oh, there are none.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Can I get a motion for the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay,
Second?
thank you. Can I call the vote? Okay, that passes 4-0. And we will move on to our regular agenda item. Item 8A is the Planning Commission reporting and work plan. This is a working session, and I'll turn it over to Anna Colamosi.
Thank you so much. I'll be sitting over here today so that I can be on the Word document here. So what I thought I would start with, and let me see here. There we go. This comes from, we're working on the reporting and work plan, and this comes from the Encinitas Municipal Code. It's section 2.30.040C, where it says each board, commission, or committee shall prepare a work plan and present an annual report to the city council. So that is the start of this, and we typically have a working session, which is what this is today. So in your packet was the 2022. As you can see, the 2023 was skipped, so we're catching up, and we're going to move forward with our 2024 work plan. And then the other section that I think is also helpful when we're looking at work plans are the duties of the Planning Commission, section 2.34.040, which says the Planning Commission shall perform such duties as may be specified by ordinance or resolution of the City Council or by the laws of the State of California. Further, the Planning Commission shall study and report to the City Council upon any matter referred to it by the City Council, and shall keep the City Council currently advised of all matters pending, and shall furnish any special information, reports, or materials which the City Council may request. So those are those items. And then another thing that I just wanted to show is the from City Council, because it's very much focused on City Council priorities. This is their strategic plan for the 2024-2025. And so if you want to refer to this at any time, we can pull this up, and it's listed here. It is found also on the city's webpage. It talks about the goals of the City Council. I do have there's also another image actually that I'd like to show you that kind of summarizes those strategic goals here in this image. And what I did was pull up the prior work plan and made some edits that we can look at together. And however the chair and the commission would like to go through it, I'll be looking to you all to see how you would like to review it through. And then we can talk about whatever you'd like, and hopefully we can solidify it this evening, and then I would bring it back with all of your comments at the next hearing per resolution.
Okay, thank you, Anna. before we jump into that, Mr. O'Grady, would you like to address the commission?
I would, thanks. Glenn O'Grady, Leucadia. I just wanted to point out one thing that has always been a bugaboo with me, and something that I really kind of stumbled over when I was early in my tenure on the Planning Commission. And there was a couple of things that the city was doing that wasn't following the state code. And that's the annual report on the general plan and the housing element. The city wasn't doing the annual report on the general plan itself, and staff are only doing the report on the housing element, and they were just sending it directly up to the state without having the city council adopt it. And so I got the city to start doing that again, so that both of the documents, one, that the general plan report was annual report was prepared. They're both due April 1st. And also getting the housing element report reviewed by the city council. What I wanted, what I had hoped to have, was that the report, that staff would bring it to the commission before giving it to the council. Because, I mean, you guys see the, individual actions, day by day kind of thing. But it's always good to periodically go up to 30,000 feet and take a look at things. And back in 2003, on March 15th, the council had, it was taken to council. Former Planning Commissioner Ehlers, who's now council member, it was on consent. It was Councilmember Ehlers pulled it to talk about it. It was this past year, on March 20th, the current one was approved went to council again on consent, not talked about. Nobody pulled it. And I think this is a chance for the commission to review these kind of documents and give them a chance to sort of give your perspective to the council about how things are going. I mean, you get individually items like an element general plan element update review by you and commented, but you don't really get a chance to talk about it generally. And as you're forming your work plan, there may be things that jump out at you, or you may actually disagree with what some of the comments from staff are in the report. Gives you a chance to look at it. And so far they haven't done it. In the past, staff sort of said, well, we'll let you review it after the fact, which kind of defeated the purpose of being able to comment to the council. But anyways, so just to clarify, the state regs require the planning, whoever is responsible at the city for planning. Now, the Planning Commission has been tasked by the municipal code for certain functions, but they have not been designated the planning group within the city. The council has always retained that. So as far as the state regs concerned, the council is basically recommending to the council, on the report kind of thing. So anyways, when I saw that you're doing sort of your view of your work plan, I just wanted to interject and hopefully get you to sort of, push to have this kind of review, annual review of how things are going generally, both the general plan itself, the whole general plan, so that you can comment, and maybe if you see things that you would like as a commission to address or to review, you have the chance to, and also, what may be coming ahead of you and stuff like that. So anyways, I just wanted to bring that out. I've always been an advocate of not being passive as a planning commission, that, the planning commission should be active, not crazy active. Not going off the reservation, but you really have responsibilities, and I think being proactive is the way to fulfill them. So anyways.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming back to
Sure. Oh, yeah.
share your knowledge with us. So.
Yeah, I try to stay away unless it's sort of the functions of the commission itself that, if I have any kind of input
Okay.
to provide, I'm happy to do that. So, yeah.
If I could just ask a clarifying question of maybe the city.
May I
attorney.
ask a clarifying question?
Okay. Can you, what would be, so it sounds to me like currently it's not required that those two reports come to the Planning Commission. If it was this group's feeling that they would like to see those, is that a petition to the city council? What's required to make that happen? I don't think we get to unilaterally decide what things come.
So I don't know what the city's practice is. State code is 65402, I believe, that talks about those requirements. And basically, by April, there you go. Let's see if I know my law. 65400, oh, so close, off by 2. 402 is the real estate requirements, but at any rate, off by 2 code sections. So it says in here that the annual report needs to be done by April 1st. If you want that to happen, I'm sure, it's more of a staff question. Is that something that we could accommodate?
So that would be directed by city council, right?
And the way of doing that would be to bring it up to city council at a public comment at one of their meetings, or is it to petition through, as a commission, through the staff to do it, or?
I would say that in my eyes, and I'll look to the assistant city attorney, is bringing it as a future agenda item to describe what you'd like to see, the purpose of seeing it, how it relates to the commission's role, and then there would be a vote that you all agree that it should go to city council, and then it's brought by a representative of the commission to the city council.
Okay, thank you. Susan, you had a question?
Yes, so with respect to the information that our commenter was sharing, so the process that the state establishes is that things like the housing element come to us first,
Well,
and
again,
then on to the city council, and how does our work plan incorporate these kinds of items, such as mobility element or, the housing element?
well, I would think, well, for one thing, I forgot to mention that back in 2003, when they approved it at council, Mayor Kranz had made a statement that there was a wealth of information in that report. And it was a gold mine, that's what he said, and that was his term. But again, I think the distinction is the code, the state code talks about the planning group or the planning function for that organization, city, county. And as I say, technically speaking, the planning commission is not that group. It's still the city council. So as far as the state code's concerned, as far as I can tell, they're within the requirements, that the council is the planning group, so it's basically telling itself what's going on. But I think for your advantage, for the planning commission's advantage and insight is to, be able to review it so that you can, if you have any comments or whatever, good or bad, on that report, that the council would see that before they moved on it.
I think we get the gist of it, and I appreciate your bringing it to our attention. I think we'll have that discussion and see where we fall on that. Susan, did that answer your question? Okay. Thank you very much. I do appreciate you being here tonight.
My pleasure, thanks.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to close the public comment portion of this meeting and open it up to commission deliberation. I think, just to put my understanding to it is that the current goals are really kind of top down from the commission or from the council of what they would like us to be working on, and where our discretion or parts of our discussion tonight would be on as time permits and future goals, items we'd like to see added to the work plan. So I'll open it up for comment. I think we're going to lean heavily on Anna tonight to maybe guide us through this process. But I know, Susan, you've asked repeatedly about work plans, and maybe you have a starting point or something specific that you'd like to discuss first.
Well, yes, because I was appointed basically in 2019, starting in 2020. And my understanding is that for the work plan to be effective, we would have volunteers from the Planning Commission to actively research, maybe attend, say, the mobility, traffic safety meeting and report back. When we have a Planning Commissioner report, if we have never attended the Housing Commission meeting, we would have to be going through their minutes, and hopefully that would include enough detail. But as we know, minutes are usually condensed versions of what goes on. And talking points may not always be reflected in minutes entirely. So I think that we may have been remiss in the past few years. I do not think I've served on a task force, for example, here and there, several different times. But I looked on our different commissions that we have as a city. And for example, the Housing Authority Commission hasn't met since 2021, I believe. There were no minutes posted for this year, last year, or the year before. At least they didn't post it. Maybe they met. To me, if they aren't looking at that for 3 years in a row, and then all of a sudden we have to come up with housing element, and we're going to have like a race to the finish line to get this housing element ready to submit, to HCD. That doesn't seem right. It seems to me we should be having annual discussions about all of these topics. Our mobility plan that was last approved was in 1989. It's been a while. It seems to me we've been remiss. I think that we need to have a workflow for our commission such that we address this work plan routinely and in a way that's productive, not belabor it, but at least we need to spend some time. And since we cannot have violations of the Brown law, I noticed that in past planning commissions, only 2 commissioners would typically be assigned to an area that they were reviewing. And they'd bring that back to the public meeting so that everybody is on the same page.
And I believe you've been doing that with the El Camino Real master plan, right? You and Kevin, I believe, were attending those meetings and reporting back to our group while they were going.
Well, when we were given that task of volunteering, one planning commissioner could be on it, others could attend, but one person would be a voting member on that task force. Realistically, I think Bruce Ehlers voluntarily attended it at times when he was a planning commissioner, attended other things. Kevin Doyle also sometimes voluntarily would come. Bob Prendergast also sometimes just voluntarily showed up. But it should be more structured such that we have a couple of us that volunteer and are diligent, and we can count on them that they're going to give us some feedback on these kinds of things. So I would like to see a little more structure, I guess is my bottom line, so that we don't have 3 years go by when it's sort of just really vague, and maybe I go to this task force, but I'm the only one of us that goes.
Sure.
That kind of thing.
Okay. Well, thank you for those insights. I'd want to be careful that we maybe, I don't know, just reacting a little bit would be to say, I think at any time we could, as a new, agenda item or as end of the meeting to say, I think we should, appoint an ad hoc committee or a task force to go address this, attend this meeting and report back. Whether that was on the work plan or not, I think would work. And I want to be cautious about putting too much on our plate. I want to be clear that in my mind, we are this kind of quasi-judicial where we're reacting to or responding to evidence and information presented to us, but that we're not necessarily actively out trying to craft the mobility plan or trying to craft these documents, right? That we're wanting to see those and understand them. But some of that is, I think, in other people's purview.
I think the point is that we want to be apprised of what these other commissions are doing if it's something on our work plan. If it's not on our work plan, like art or something maybe isn't on our work plan, well, then we don't look at that, and
I like that's an important connection to me, I guess, is to narrow it down to things that they're doing that affect the work plan that we are trying to achieve. Okay. Chris, do you have any comments?
But I would love to hear the other commissioners' point of view, and it's possible that things could be done a bit differently than they had a few years ago, right? So maybe other people have other things to say.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question as to the structure of what we're doing tonight and the approach. So the work plan that we have in front of us, the January 2020 to December 21, has the list, current goals. And I'm wondering from Anna, is there a new list of current goals?
Yes, on page 1 of the staff report, it lists the current goals. And what I did
That's on page
was
1. Okay.
I started modifying the tables to reflect that. And there's a couple changes that I can talk through as well that I made in addition to the current goals listed based on the first reading of the budget that occurred yesterday at City Council.
Okay, so it's my understanding from what Steve said that current goals are the ones that City Council has directed as current goals. So we're really kind of not addressing those and moving to as time permits. Is that correct?
That's correct, unless you see any, glaring, thing that City Council may be missing that you'd want to present to them at the when you present your work plan to them.
Okay. So I'm going to speak to what Susan said just really briefly. I think that some of that's a really good idea that we have more information about what other commissions are doing that directly affect what we do. Because I think there sometimes is a disconnect between what one commission might do and then what we do. So I don't know how we exactly do that, and maybe we need to think about how we move forward on that as far as, and I don't know if it's just, looking at agendas as they come out and making decisions as to, I volunteer to go to this meeting because they're going to be addressing this issue that directly reflects our commission, or if we have something that's more structured. So, Chris is the person who, if something affects us, goes to these commission meetings, and Steve has these commission meetings if it affects us. I don't know how we want to approach that, but I think there's different ways we can think about approaching something like that.
Mm-hmm. I could see it.
Because we're volunteers, it has to be on a volunteer basis.
Yes. And I don't necessarily think it even has to be the same person always going to the same meetings either. If you really want to go to traffic one time, I can go to traffic the next week and kind of think about spreading that out too, understanding we all have the work that we do here and other things that we volunteer for, jobs and family. So kind of
And I have
having
a question
structure,
for
but-
the attorney. If someone like Bob Prendergast used to be on Traffic Commission, right, and he stepped down to be on Planning Commission, is it a bad idea for him to attend that meeting and then report out to us?
So if there is a public hearing item if it's something that they're making a decision on, and then that decision would come to you, if it's a specific project, it would be problematic. I'm not sure how that particular committee is organized. Do they have quasi judicial actions that they take action on, or is it purely recommending body?
I'm actually not aware of that, but for example, they would weigh heavily in on the mobility element, and they have throughout this process, and so they would be providing recommendations as well, and then that is coming forward to Planning Commission, and then also as part of my secretary reports, I try to inform the commission about workshops that are occurring and things like that that can also be some information regarding it.
Yeah, so it's not a legal issue for something like that. It is permissible to hear what they're discussing, and then he could bring that. If, for example, he wanted to attend or somebody else wanted to attend, that would not be an issue. The only issue would be if...
He's not voting, so.
Right. The only potential issue might be if it were some sort of a due process problem, like if they took an action and it got appealed to you, for example, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
Brent, do you have
Yeah.
some comments?
Well, I do like the idea of
The reason I asked was because I thought maybe since he used to serve on it, he might be a logical choice to attend it because he understands how they do things.
Thank you. Brent?
and definitely incorporating the discussion they're having in other groups into what we're doing is important for sure. I do support that. Seems like it would be helpful if it was very targeted. So as you suggested, we had prior discussions about how it relates to something that we have on our agenda, and we seek out that specific targeted information from them.
Not to get too far into the weeds, I could see that some items that might come through, say, the Traffic Commission, might be eventually brought to us for, like, their recommendation comes to us for us to take actual action on it. And then in that situation, I don't think it would be particularly appropriate that we were engaged in the conversation about what the mobility plan should be if we're going to turn around in the next meeting and act as the judge of whether to approve it or not. I'm just cautious about trying to put our reach into every thing. I'd be very much in favor of very targeted, specific outreach in that way, rather than a wholesale, like if there's a traffic commission, we should always have someone there. Okay. I think if that's the comments, not that we're finished with those conversations, but I think we should maybe turn it over to Anna, and maybe you could pull up the work plan that you have as kind of a draft version, and maybe if we can kind of go through that as a group, and those items that jump out and someone wants to discuss or understand better, that we can pause on those and discuss them, and those things that are clear and understood, we'll just move on from. Okay?
Okay, I have on the left-hand side of the screen is what the staff report included from 2022. And then on the right is my working document for what would be brought forward as a resolution when we're ready to do that. Some of the things you'll notice that were removed because the Planning Commission did take action on them, provided a recommendation to City Council on, is the Senate Bill 9, and I believe we had about 5 hearings on that one. Mobility and circulation element is still yet to come to the Planning Commission, so that stays on the list on the right. As you know, the El Camino Real specific plan stays on the list as well on the right. Accessory dwelling units, I was going to remove the word parking because it's being included as part of what we do regularly, updating our zoning ordinance to be in compliance with state law. So I was just going to remove the word parking from there and keep that on.
Yeah, if you're looking for a head nod, I would say agreed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then modify appeal periods, you all voted on that as well, provided recommendations, and that one is completed by Planning Commission. The public safety element as well is one that you had all worked on. Short-term rentals, that one is also being removed. And then we move to number 8, which is outdoor dining, which staff is currently working on, and that will be coming forward.
Can you clarify for me, is outdoor dining related to the temporary use of parking in front of restaurants for dining, or is,
That's correct.
okay, that is the issue. Okay,
So it's coming forth with an ordinance. Sidewalk, we have already a sidewalk cafe permit process in place. So this is for on-street parking and utilizing that in a permanent manner for outdoor dining.
okay. I think that is an important, I mean, this is dictated to us from council, so I'm in agreement with that, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
Thank you.
they're well on their way working on drafts of that. Then moving on to native plant ordinance, as you know, there was this added on to the budget initially, and we'll see at the next budget hearing if that remains on. But as of now, I was including it in the work plan. And then increase in affordable housing was going to keep that. I know that that is an ongoing concern for the city, and so that was going to stay on to the work plan there. There's no specifics coming yet from city council, but I do remember it being said to be an important issue to stay on. And policy interpretations, this one is being removed, and I wanted to make sure that I made you all aware, if you weren't already. We have our applications and information page that has all the policy interpretations by Planning Commission that are listed on there. I wonder if I can easily get to
If I recall, I think the planning commission put that on at the last session, maybe.
Yes, it was a desire, I think when Bruce Ehlers was here, to have those public, being able to, Planning Commission to be able to go to them on previous decisions that were made, as well as the public and staff, because it was asked, how is staff tracking these things? And so we put them all together, did a search, and then as we go, if we find more, we're adding them, just in case, something is missed. Because at times, what had happened, what we were finding is a determination was made during a project review. And so it wasn't necessarily brought forward as a policy interpretation that formally came forward. So every once in a while, we do find those and add them to the list when they come to light. And I'm happy to also send that link of where those policy interpretations are after this meeting. And I can also show it this evening if you'd like me to. The omnibus code cleanup, that is something we are doing, just cleanups, so not an update, but cleanups. That is in the works right now that we are starting. And then that is the list on the left from the current goals from last time. And then the new list is the mobility element, specific plan, accessory dwelling units, removing parking, and outdoor dining, native plant ordinance, increase affordable housing, omnibus bus cleanup. And then, as you have already heard, the Assembly Bill 2011, Senate Bill 6, those improvements are also, that ordinance is also being created, as well as Assembly Bill 2097, all directed, again, by City Council to move forward with those items. So replacement housing was on here. There are now state laws that we have to abide by. And so I was going to remove this one because housing has to be replaced. And there's, many, many nuances of when, how long it's been there, and things like that staff internally has been implementing state law on and requiring replacement housing. So I'm not sure if the commission was comfortable with me removing that item.
Can we get a show of hands if you're comfortable with removing that? Yes. Are you comfortable, Susan, with removing the replacement housing? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mature tree ordinance, that is in motion, and that is staying on the list. And then one that was added that was not listed in the staff report is the resource management that was added and budgeted because it is required to be updated by January 2026. And so that has been added onto the current goals list.
Can I clarify the last three there that were highlighted and you're asking, are those that we would go back to the council and suggest, or have those already been put on by the council?
They've already been put on by council. Well, with the exception of replacement housing, that one is the one that's being removed because we're already implementing the state law.
Okay.
Okay, so
Can as
Yes.
a procedural thing in the future, as we move into past the work plan, we have the work plan in place. The thing like the omnibus code cleanup, how would the commission actively engage with that? Is that going to come from staff saying we want to do this to the ordinance, clean up this section, or is the commission going to say to the staff, hey, this is a bad section, we should clean this up?
We are going to bring it forward to the commission with what we have found that needs to be cleaned up, and then that will be your opportunity to make any other suggestions, and that would be the time.
Okay, thank you. All
Okay.
right, so that is the current goals that are largely dictated by the city council. I think there's an opportunity if there were something that we thought was of a super important or higher importance that we would want to approach the city council and say, we think you should consider this also, right? We ultimately need their authorization to put it on our current plan. So does this list look complete to you in that regard? Remember, there's 3 sections that we're going to talk about.
Anna, can you, oh, good. Can you, I was just asking if you could scroll down.
Okay. Seeing no comments on that, Anna, I think we could move to this screen now.
Okay.
As time permits. Now, these
So-
are much more at our discretion about what we'd like to spend our time looking at.
Yes, so still high importance, and on the radar of city council, but they weren't included as part of the budget. They weren't, specified, directed to authorize changes to the ordinances, things like that.
Okay. Susan, did I see a comment or did you have a question?
Well, I'm still looking at page 1 of 28 here of the staff report. It says the work program is formatted in 3 categories, and then you have the current goals. But above that, the last sentence of this says it's from January 2022 through December 2023. We're now in 2024. Does this list then, this was old, or
Yes,
this staff report?
Yes, I had missed last year, and so we are catching up and making sure that moving forward, this is done annually.
Okay, so what we're looking at on the other screen is where we are today?
Correct.
On the right side is the current list that we will hope to adopt at the end of the meeting tonight.
And our current program, our current work plan, has how many items? Oh, it's in the same document. Okay, that helps.
Are you asking, when you say current, do you mean current from 2024 and city council's priorities, or the current work plan from 2022 that we have? Just to clarify.
The
think
one that
that-
we should be working on now, I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Okay, so that, now I have that up on the screen right now. This has been updated. This version that you see on the screen only right now is the one that's been updated with the items that have been listed on page 1 of the staff report, and removed the ones we just discussed that were being removed. So that that's what this table now should reflect.
So the ones on the screen, are they in a particular order of prioritization? Is number one the top priority, or it's not in a prioritized list?
It's not prioritized.
Okay, but do we have a prioritized list from council?
There are timelines that council has established for each item. I do not have that information, but I can see if that's something that I can look into and bring forward.
Would it be helpful if Anna just went through the new plan instead of trying to compare it to the old one?
I am
And-
moving now to only the old plan. So it was just the current goals that I had to show both.
Okay,
But
so-
now it's the old plan with us having discussion of it as under the as time permits and the long-term goals.
Okay, so as I see it, as time permits, the old plan had 6 items. We can decide whether those 6 items still apply or if we want to add more items to that list.
Okay, so as time permit goals, the first one, community character, was going to be removed because we do have objective design standards now, and there were no established community character guidelines, so that one was going to be removed.
I would agree with that.
Okay, sign ordinance, we can leave it up there. I know the city has tried before. It's trying to, there was some, I guess, challenges with laws and regulations on sign ordinances. So if it's a desire to be updated, it can stay on there. It hasn't been talked about.
Do you
In
recall
some
why
time.
it was put, like, was it put on there?
It says here specifically to resolve conflicts with the First Amendment rights, and then to standardize digital signs, because the Greek Orthodox Church that came forward to Planning Commission, they asked for digital signage, and I think the discussion kind of
Okay.
went from there.
Okay. I don't have a lot of background with the sign ordinance and what we're looking to review. So Brent or Susan, Chris, any?
No, I just have concerns about us trying to resolve conflicts with the First Amendment. I mean, we're not First Amendment experts.
So in my experience, I don't know the specifics of this particular ordinance and why this is listed. In my experience, no city has a compliant sign ordinance. There's always something wrong with the city sign ordinance, just because the First Amendment is so complicated and there are competing business concerns, reasons that governments want to do certain things. So my guess is that there would be cleanup that would need to be done. It always needs to be done in every municipal code. I don't know any more than that.
I'd be willing to just let those things come to us on a case-by-case basis as people encounter issues with the sign ordinance. They could petition for a policy interpretation.
Yeah, I think that we should take a look at the sign ordinance. And I think maybe that can even be a group discussion of the Planning Commission to just review it, one topic, and before we get to the meeting, review it independently, and then discuss if we think there's something City Council should look at. I think that would be a quick way to do it and an easy way, so that we don't spend a lot of time on it at a meeting.
Mm-hmm. You're saying one section at a meeting over the course of several meetings?
How big is the sign ordinance? How many pages?
I don't know, but usually sign ordinances are extremely complicated and lengthy.
I'm going to say I agree with Steve, and I think we could take this off and deal with sign issues as they come to us.
Mm-hmm. Brent, where do you want to weigh in on this?
I'm wondering, like, has it come up in a significant way before where the ordinance was just inadequate and entirely? And in not having that being said, it seems like a case-by-case basis would probably be sufficient.
It hasn't come up in the 3 years I've been here. I don't think we've had a sign issue to resolve. So,
How
Susan,
would
is there
we do that on a case by case? Do you mean like someone,
someone encounters like an ordinance that doesn't, part of that ordinance that doesn't allow them to do what they want to do, and they think it's wrong?
Or it could be part of their application for a project, and
They
it,
can come
draws
to
us to,
us.
take a look at the ordinance at that time.
Yeah.
well, don't we want to be a little more comprehensive than that? Don't we want to take a look at it? And, for example, the sign ordinance, what it has in it, first of all, is, timeframes, sizes, formatting, like if it could be flashing or whatever, if it's some sort of digital or if it's just static. So I think certain guidelines would be pretty easy for us to just look at. And I think that case by case isn't necessarily very legal, because if we decide one side's okay and another one isn't, I think that right away causes you some difficulties legally. So I think it's better if we would come up with something a little more general that just applies universally, as far as, your sign can be this big, your sign can stay up this long, your sign requires a fee to post it, your sign doesn't require a fee, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I think a few general things, if we just look through it and we see anything that looks kind of glaring, that we could make a recommendation and not deal with case by case.
My hesitation here is that, so I've used the sign ordinance on projects and submittals, and there's general outlines of how big lettering can be and how big the boards can be and all of that stuff. I don't know what I'd be looking for. I mean, I don't know of a current issue with the sign ordinance. And so I don't want to necessarily just open it up just to go look for a potential issue. I'm not sure what I'm looking for. And I don't want to be particularly trying to rewrite, present myself as an expert in signage. I'd like someone, if they have an issue with it, then they can bring that issue to us and say, this is not right, and we can make a judicial decision that, yes, we think it's fine in the way it is, or we agree with you, you can change it. But I don't think we want to actively be the writers of that ordinance right now.
Yeah, I kind of support that.
Okay. I'm kind of seeing some consensus build around that idea that we will let projects come to us on a case-by-case basis as they encounter issues with the sign ordinance, with the exception that I acknowledge, Susan, that you don't agree with that position.
So are we removing
Well, I
it?
think the point of it being on the work plan is that we're supposed to look at it with reference to First, Fifth, 14th Amendment, that kind of thing, and see if we see anything that sort of sticks out and that we think shouldn't be or should be there. I think that's what they wanted us to do anyway, but I could be wrong. I'm not on council.
Yeah.
So-
I've got
but they put
two
it on the work
attorneys
plan.
sitting here at the board that are very nervous to go into the Fourth, Fifth, and First Amendment. I don't think I want to jump into it as a non-attorney.
If you'd like, I can move it to the long-term goals or remove it. So whichever you like. I will just clarify, the concern was about digital signs and how we wanted to regulate that they couldn't flash. So for example, the Greek Orthodox Church, we conditioned, it was a use permit, so we were able to condition it to say it can only change every 1 minute. So there's not any even close perception that it's flashing in any way. So there are standards in place that help guide the planners. And so ones that come that don't have use permits, we use those same guidelines and have them put notes on things like that so that there's no flashing, but there's no prohibition of digital signs in the sign ordinance. So if that was a concern, maybe that would be something there.
So does that alter anybody's thinking maybe I broadened it too greatly I'm not interested in opening up the whole ordinance and digging through every aspect of it.
Yeah, it seems like if we keep it targeted to digital signs, and it will give us an opportunity to look at the other parts of that ordinance, and if something is worthy of discussion then about that, then we take it on.
Okay, any other thoughts?
I still support either taking it off completely or moving it to long-term goals. I think that we can deal, the way it was done with the Greek Orthodox Church, it can be done on a, basis of when cases come in.
I think maybe, Anna, what you're suggesting is if it was a non-discretionary project that wasn't going to come to the Planning Commission because it didn't require a minor use permit or major use permit or conditional use permit, that they might just go implement a sign and say that this is allowed by right with no review by the city or by our commission.
Right, but the concern was flashing or not flashing. And so we have regulations that if somebody saw a flashing sign and alerted code enforcement to it, then we are able to make them alter it.
So that's already in the ordinance, that you're not
Correct.
allowed a flashing sign.
Correct.
Okay, and I felt like that was the only thing we were even reopening the issue for. Okay, I'm confident, or I'm still comfortable with my position of we'll let someone who feels they've been wronged by the ordinance come to the commission and make their case,
Yeah, I support moving it.
moving it to long-term.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we take out the language that says resolve conflicts with First Amendment rights? I don't feel comfortable with leaving it on the plan with that language.
You don't want to
I
be
don't
part
have
of the
videos.
Supreme Court here?
I do not.
Okay. If I could take a moment just to recognize that Commissioner Pendergrast has joined the group. Thank you, or welcome, Bob.
And I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to my fellow commissioners and staff and council for being late tonight.
We'll dock your pay. Okay. I'm feeling some consensus around that, and I think we could move on. I think the consensus is that we would move the sign ordinance to the long-term goals.
Okay, thank you. The next one is called Lucadia Northwest Circulation Crossings, Infrastructure Improvements to Address Needs Due to Development Within the Area. So there's a few things. I was going to remove this one because there are a few things that are being implemented. Things like the map, which I have identified prioritized projects. There's the active transportation plan and also the city council prioritizing improvements around all of the housing element developments. So things are in motion and moving. So I was going to remove it, but I'm open to how you all feel.
This one was important to me, and I was almost going to suggest that we recommend that move to the current plan to the city council. And I think in my mind, knowing now that there's things in place, maybe I say just we leave it here, meaning those things may pan out perfectly, but I would hate to drop it too quickly because I think it's been such a long simmering issue in Lucadia that I'd like to see some of the projects implemented before we drop it. Any other comments or thoughts?
I agree, and thank you.
I'm assuming, Anna, that this is the stop sign on Lucadia and Piraeus?
I think it would be any number of different.
Any number of, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And did some of this get incorporated into the streetscape? Is that?
I think streetscapes would be considered one of the improvements that would address this concern.
So I would agree with you that we should probably keep it until those are actually resolved and completed. That should stay.
Sure, okay.
And well, this is on, as time permits, should we move this up to current?
Well, so our earlier conversation was that the current is really dictated to us by the city council.
Got it. We'll stay
We
there.
can petition them or suggest to them to add something, but I was saying, I don't think we would add this because I think things are in motion. But by leaving it in this category, we're at least able to monitor or say that, see that those projects get implemented or that they address the problem.
Good.
Okay. Susan or Brent, any thoughts or comments?
It's a mobility and safety issue, isn't it, really? I'm not sure why it's a separate item.
I think
but
just because
it seems like it could go with mobility and,
I'd hate to get it buried in there. I mean, I agree with you that it falls within that category, but I think it's been such a specific problem in Northwest Leucadia that I would keep
I
it
think
as
it's
the
a
same.
fairly high priority and should stay where it is.
Okay, thank you, Susan. All right,
Okay. The next one is preservation of open space, determine ways to implement resolution 2022-04 by city council to support the conservation of open space. So it was a kind of a declaration by city council, just noting the importance of open space and connectivity. And this was just placed on there to keep it as an item to keep an eye on. So open to discussion. If you'd like to keep it, we can keep it on there, move it.
I hate to be so dense, but let's say it's on there. That doesn't mean that any one of us five are out scouring the city for open space to purchase or whatever, right? I mean, ultimately, this still is an action item that would be presented to us through the staff.
I think it's a fairly high priority personally, because once we build over open space, it's pretty much gone forever. So to me, if anything, it should be moved up in priority, but if the council has said it's here, then okay.
Yeah, okay. I think what the council has said is it's not in the other category. It's not that we couldn't suggest it, but I'm comfortable with where it sits now. But
Yep, this was one of
Thank
those
you.
added by the planning commission based on a resolution that came forward that city council said made a declaration. And so as time permits is just as important as current goals. It's just not budgeted by city council and prioritized.
okay,
I'd like to keep it here. I do think it's a priority for the city. It's a big part of our city. And keeping an eye on the open space, it does come up in our conversations on Piraeus and some of the projects that have come before us. It came up on the Baldwin site in terms of the site next to that. So I do think it's something, and it's a big component. And as some of these growing facilities come to us, we'll have to make some reviews of those. So I like it here. Just want to say
Okay.
that.
in agreement? Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next one was Citizen Participation Program. This came about from, I think, one particular project, I don't remember which one, but that there was some public, the public that didn't agree with the timing of when the Citizen Participation Program, CPP, meeting had taken place throughout the process. One thing in response to this is staff really pushing and encouraging applicants early on in the process to submit it, though there's not a standard that says this is when you have to do it. We are constantly making sure we're reminding them that it needs to occur. And there are times also where if staff believes that they didn't meet the intent of the Citizen Participation Program guidelines, that we've required second CPP meetings. Some people have done them on their own. And just kind of making sure as staff, we are keeping it as a very high priority of making sure that it's happening as soon as it can.
Are there current provisions that if a design is modified, like say they hold a CPP and then 6 months passes and the design has been modified substantially, I should say, maybe, are there provisions that would require a second CPP at that point?
That's correct. If it's substantial, we do require a CPP meeting, another additional CPP meeting. If it's a big feature, we think that should be disclosed to the public. But minor design changes, like changes in color, materials, adding a pop-out, things like that are not substantial, and we don't require CPP meetings.
I don't see this as a priority in my mind. I think the CPP process works well. I don't think we necessarily need to enable it to be design by committee thing where like the very latest design or somehow you have to have multiple of these CPP meetings. I don't remember the specific instance of where it was considered too out of date, but if the design is the same, substantially the same, I don't see why it would matter.
No, I agree, and I also think that I'm comfortable with the information that Anna gave us, that if there's a substantial change in the design, that staff does require another meeting. So I feel like this is kind of already handled by staff.
Bob, I think I saw you making a motion to, okay, Susan?
I agree. I think that staff currently has a good policy, and sometimes we have complaints, right? But it's not necessarily because of the current policy. Maybe the policy needs to be, I don't know if it's posted or something else that, makes it more obvious for applicants, but anything we can do to make it more obvious maybe would help.
Okay.
My only comment here was a while back, we had a discussion regarding the distance of which the notice would go out. I think the current code is 500 feet from the location. I think we had a pretty lengthy discussion on an applicant's, and it was only, and we considered 1,000 feet for notice provision for people. I think there was the person who was building on the slope was one. I think there was a lot split that was another one that comes to mind. But that would be something that I would like the staff, or if there's an ordinance that says, and maybe to codify in the ordinance, X number of, with a date, so that the applicant understands if they were to submit, they have 4 weeks to submit. I think the more clear we are in the ordinance, then the applicant and therefore the public, residents nearby who are affected by the site, can understand what that timeline is versus it being random. Is there an ordinance from the date of application to a time where CPP has to go out? And is there a limit? Is there a 500 square foot or 500 foot radius in the ordinance?
There is a 500-foot distance in which there needs to be a mail out for. And the CPP says that it has to occur prior to the public hearing. And that's the language that's in there. So there's no time limit. It gets a little unique because there are projects which will come in for a first submittal, and staff will have so many comments that it changes the design. So you wouldn't want to set something, because then we would be requiring another CPP.
Right.
And so some people still do it before they even submit. When they come in for staff advisory committee meetings, we call them SAC meetings. It's a voluntary, if you have a big project, you come in and speak with all the discipline reviewers. And we really focus on, we recommend you do hold a CPP meeting prior to submitting, but that does mean that you may be required for another one, and so we disclose all of that information. But we really focus on the importance of connecting with the community and hearing them early on in the process. But I do understand how sometimes they put something forward to us not knowing if we're going to say, you can't do this, right? And then it would change the whole project, and then they'd have to provide a CPP meeting.
Okay. Well, I think the ordinance covers the fact that the applicant has time to make amendments, meet with staff, go back, adjust the project at staff recommendations before putting the CPP together. So maybe the timeline is not applicable. But I would like to consider expanding, and I think we discussed it at one point, and I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts, if there's a regulation that doesn't allow us to have a distance. Anyway, to me, that's just more communication.
Okay, so without getting into the discussion specifically about this ordinance, right? I'm hearing that this is a topic that you are interested in discussing further, and my question might be, does it merit a position in the work plan, or is this something that we say as a future agenda item at, at what level of significance?
I'd like it to stay here so that in the future, we can talk about that specific, and that, I don't want to remove it unless we have a conversation about an adjustment or a suggestion or a conversation about the distance. So I guess to answer your question, please leave it on. I would like to leave this on to have a conversation in the future about that.
Okay, I can support that. Any other thoughts or comments? expiration.
Yes,
Extensions of stale
expiration,
permits.
extensions of stale permits. This comes from, I think, a long time ago, and again, probably a project basis where, use permits don't expire unless you hold a hearing for them. And so that doesn't apply to coastal development permits, design review permits. And so I'm not quite sure if this is a priority for the commission, if there has been any concern since this has been added. I'm not quite sure if this was added in 2018 or even prior to that. So it's sometimes sparked by a specific project, but if it was something that was continually happening, then I can see how it would be something that would need to be, to remain on here.
Okay. Comments?
So, not to have a discussion about it, just for clarification, in our city, it's if a permit expires, does the staff notify the applicant that the permit expired? Who is are we proactive or are we reactive? And I guess if I don't.
Yeah, we can't monitor all permits that come through on when they expire. But for example, if we're working on a project and we notice it is nearing expiration, so it should be on the applicant, the owners themselves, but staff tries as best as they can. If they see it, they notify the applicant. And then also if they've satisfied a condition of approval on there, sometimes it kind of locks them into the permit stays. And they can continue on as long as they show that they're continually working on their, if they've built a foundation, if they've, started construction, things like that. So it's really case by case basis.
How does the public know on the city website if an applicant's application has expired or permit has expired?
If they wanted to specifically know about one on a specific property, there is an online tool where you can go and look in attachments for that property, and it shows the permit there, and it has the expiration date within the resolution or notice of decision, and that's how they would know.
I understood that this was on the list because someone was concerned that a permit that does not expire could be carried through indefinitely, and that this was intended to make a provision that would say that through a commission decision, it could be made to have expired? Or am I misunderstanding that?
I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that we could say that the permit that we approved has expired. So that would give us the authority to say the applicant's permit from 2 years ago has expired?
Yeah. It sounds incredibly impossible to me to do. But that's what I thought was being suggested in this thing, that there was somehow these old conditional use permits or some sort of old permit that no one's aware of, and then a landowner comes out of the blue and says, well, you have to let me do it because I have this permit.
I do, I'm sorry, as you say that, I recall there was an older permit, there's a condition of approval that says that it shall demonstrate that you have been working on the project, and you could go, if they want to argue it, they could come before the hearing body to argue, look we've been working on it, and it should be still valid. But we have since changed that condition of approval. That's a little bit more concrete. You expire after these 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay, did that have to do with the corner of La Costa and 101? Isn't that's I think that's when the change was made after that, that you're talking about.
I'm seeing a nod in the audience.
The piece of land that the city is buying, the company.
Okay.
The timeshare
Yes,
company.
the former Surfers Point.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, many cities do have standards where, for example, because of code changes that are updated all the time, and like a hold-down anchor might be changed to a different size. So depends on where the phase of that project is, but don't we already have provisions for that kind of thing where if the permit, if it hasn't been, if construction hasn't begun and then, they're delaying and, oh yeah, well, they did some work, they excavated or something, but still, if code changes happen, don't they have to go through the process again and have new stamp and sign and so forth?
If they have implemented construction, no. But if that hasn't occurred, then yes, there is the chance that that can occur.
It's a fine line, and Steve is probably very familiar with it in his profession of pulling permits and extending them, and there's ways, but the code handles all of that.
There's very finite ways, though.
Yeah,
You can
exactly.
extend it for 6 months, and then you have to show progress or,
Move dirt.
Ultimately, you get about 18 months
Yes.
or 2 years to build your house or something like that.
That's right, or commercial projects too, and you can move, there are ways, but I think the code covers that, and that's the building department's responsibility to track that.
I'm not sensing a whole lot of agency or people wanting to own this issue, and I'd recommend we remove it.
I agree.
That's fine, yeah, I agree.
Okay? Long-term goals?
Long-term goals. Land use element update. We do want to keep that up there. I think the commission would want to probably keep that up there just as addressing any updates to the land use element that may arise. Although the regulating the size of single-family residents, we have in place our development standards, our objective design standards. I think this came about when a lot of the smaller homes were being demolished and constructed with really large homes. And so this came up several years ago about wanting to regulate the size of single-family homes so that people are not able to do that. And then the second part of that is just zoning code update, which is different than omnibus code cleanup. Zoning code update is really getting into the details of changing how the zoning code is read, how it's applied. It's more like changing the code.
Okay.
Can we go back to can we talk about the regulation of the size of the single-family home? So I'm going to suggest removing that. This hasn't been in place, and so you have neighborhoods now that have large homes and have small homes, and you get into kind of that fairness argument that we've talked about in some of the neighborhoods and some of the projects where you have houses on the street who have made the changes already and have a two-story house, and you have the single-story house who wants to become a two-story, and they come in and show us all the two stories in the neighborhood, we should be able to do it too, kind of thing. To then now, in 2024, to go in and try to regulate the size of a house by looking at the houses in the neighborhood, I think we're opening ourselves up to a lot of issues. And
Yeah.
I think there's reasons this hasn't been done, and I would suggest taking this off.
Currently, we have no minimum size, right? Basically, we're limited to maybe the smallest being to make it conform to code
Building code.
IBC, which is like 220 square feet or something.
Yeah, I believe either 190 or 220. Yes, that's correct, per the building code.
I would agree that I don't think there should be any restriction on a two-story house going up next to a one-story house if that's permitted across the entire neighborhood. There's FAR restrictions that limit the size of all houses in Encinitas, and so that is in place, and that seems uniformly kind of fair to everybody. But I would support having this.
Yeah, I support not having a lower limit, just going with that 220 that's already.
We might have separate issues, but I think we're talking about what the upper limit would be on a house, and we're saying that's already regulated by FAR, floor area ratio, and we don't need further ordinances limiting the size of a single-family house.
Yeah, and I'm more concerned on the lower limit
Yeah, so
than the
let's,
upper limit. I'm not really worried about the upper limit. If somebody wants to build big, that's
let's take
their
an,
property. They have a certain floor area ratio, and open space requirement, and they meet it, and
let's take it in two parts then.
I think
if
we
could
already have it
focus on the-
covered just by other code.
Okay, thank you.
But the lower end, I'm concerned about, because some building departments,
Susan, let's come
some
back to the
cities,
lower
some
end.
jurisdictions say you have to build a minimum of a certain size, and I don't want us to go that route.
So would you rename this? I mean, right now, we're talking about what is the maximum size, and we could add a separate category or rename this to say we want to study eliminating any minimum size house. But if the minimum size already is at 190 or something, I mean, 220, awfully small. Not, I don't care if it
really-
goes smaller than that myself, but
Yeah, I don't really think that I would like to get into this one. I think it's okay as is.
okay. So,
Yeah.
go ahead, Bob.
Just to your point about the FAR, code covers zoning R11, R1, there's a zone code. FAR kicks in, setbacks kick in, open space kicks in, and if they can build within the envelope, that's great. There's also a height restriction, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so a two-story, I get 1 and 2 stories. I'm not a big fan of 3-story houses, but I guess there's an ordinance that
You don't get 'em.
You don't get them because there's a height limit,
Yeah.
right? So I'm just clarifying that before I say yes, I think we should remove this section. The second sentence, though, should be addressed as part of, I guess, there's a zoning and update. I don't want to eliminate the conversations below it.
Let's take that as a
That's
second
right,
part.
that's B.
I
That's
think
B.
we're
Excuse me, yes.
finding maybe a consensus on the single-family house size.
Sorry.
I think we will come back and find the similar consensus on the next, because I think there are code updates. Yeah, okay.
The way that it's worded here, it makes it sound like we want to make neighborhoods conform and be sort of cookie cutter, which I don't like at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
so-
And I would like to, if I may, so some zones don't have an FAR limit, but they have lot coverage, height, and everything else. I just wanted you to know that there's the lower zones that don't have an FAR requirement because they're on larger lots and they're, yeah.
I'm not hearing anything supporting keeping this here.
Okay, so I would suggest that we remove that item from our long-term goals. To address Susan's earlier point, is there any desire to address the minimum house size? Currently, we understand it to be 220 square feet. Do we want a discussion in the future about whether that should be removed as a limit?
I think it's good as is.
Okay, thank you. Back to the second part of this, which talks about a comprehensive zoning ordinance update beyond just the omnibus code cleanup. I would say, in my experience, Encinitas has one of the worst zoning codes in the county to read and interpret and understand. So anything that clarifies that, I think, is a benefit.
Yes, anything to streamline and clean up, I'm in favor of. So if there's conflicts that are there that need to be resolved by a thorough review, then let's do it. That's our job.
Okay. So I'm hearing that we want to keep, I think it was labeled item A or something on there, that one. That should just become a standalone long-term goal.
Under the land use element update, because it was
Oh.
A and B,
Okay, yeah,
So
so
it'd be-
take away A, but keep B.
understood.
And Chair, do we need to make any changes to, I'm fine with just the macro zoning update, but do we need to address any of the bullets that have been identified in the prior? There's a list of a few bullets that are there. Do we need to add some, take some away?
Maybe take away the sign code update, since we
Sure.
removed
Yeah,
that from
was
the
a-
other
yeah,
area.
I heard that conversation, so.
I would agree.
All right. Anything
Or
to
add the
add?
word First Amendment after it.
Is there anything to add, given your experience and the complications of the code, that you would suggest adding to that list?
The height limit is an incredibly difficult, not difficult, but very
Obtuse.
obtuse description in the code.
Okay, let's
So-
put that down. Anything else that anybody is bumped up against that we could specifically call out here?
I do know that recently there was a public comment at our last meeting about relating to height again, I guess, but the measuring from the crown of a street.
Oh, right, that was on Snapdragon.
Yeah. And I think that's probably all rolled into this whole discussion about where grade is and where you're measuring your height limit from.
I have a question about the wording of can you scroll up a little bit, yeah, Anna? Addressing areas of frustration that do not yield desired outcomes. Whose desired outcomes is that speaking to?
Yeah, I believe that we should be probably not using words such as frustration and things like that, and think more factually
More
on things.
objectively.
So that do not yield desired outcome achieved. So that's a good question.
Why don't we just say, bring needed modernization to the zoning code, period. And then maybe a sentence about, local coastal program. I'm just, you can get rid of the rest.
I agree, it's very subjective. And
Yeah, so just, this is what we want to look at. A couple of things that come to mind also that we addressed at one time, and one was slope. There was a gentleman who required a waiver because he was in Commissioner Ryan's neighborhood, and there was a definition of slope that was a little fuzzy, if I recall. He was putting a garage unit in, and there was but the staff had said, no, you don't qualify, and we had to give him a variance for it. So slope here, and then the other issue came on Piraeus in terms of what the zoning code was to scoop out the hillside and put the retaining wall in. I don't know if that's a zoning code issue but the slope was something that was discussed.
I feel like that issue about the variance was not so much an interpretation of what slope was. It's just that he wanted a variance to do the second story closer to the street than he could have. But I don't think there was ever any debate about where his slope was.
If I may, so it's the average lot slope that applies to projects that have an average lot slope greater than 10%. And they have to measure height in a unique way that doesn't allow them to do second stories or construct a home that they wish to construct. And so there's a lot of disagreement with that just being in the code in general and providing that as a restriction. And so that's what the gentleman was talking about at the public comment,
Last week or?
Yes, last week.
Last time.
Oral communications is the words I was looking for. So he spoke at oral communications, and so what he'll have to do is present that to city council, and if city council believes that it's a priority to put on here, then we can. I added it here under height limits, including looking at average lot slope. And so if the commission wishes to keep that in here, so that would already be something of, hey, this is a goal to talk about average lot slope and whether or not we want to continue average lot slope restrictions in the city of Encinitas is what that gentleman was referring to.
I'm neither here nor there. It's just one of those things that have popped up. And the other thing that seemed to have popped up were lots of discussions on houses on Neptune that came to us last year, and there were there were some slope issues in the coastal development zone. Is that something that anybody is comfortable with, or do we have to just take another look at that ordinances?
I think that one's more problematic in that it deals with the Coastal Commission's approval of our ordinance. Personally, I don't think there's any real question about where those setbacks are. I think in the cases I can think of, there's always just been because they want to do it. Not that flippant, but I don't think it's been a question about how the code is and where those setbacks really are and why they're there. But it does, in unique conditions or one-off conditions, create some maybe hardship on an owner, and if they think it's a true hardship, they have the variance process. I suppose they could come to us.
Which is what we reviewed. I was thinking there were a lot of those that have come here are legal non-conforming lots because they're so old.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, that was something that came up a couple of times. Is everybody comfortable with the way the code works now? Or should we, and people might be comfortable with the slope wording now also, and that's fine too. Those are just some of the items that have come up in the past that were zoning issues and setback issues, and here's an opportunity to,
Right.
stick it on here.
I'm less, I'm not so interested in adding that one to the list. I agree with the slope and the height one that we talked about earlier. I do think the current setbacks from the coastal bluffs they're described adequately, and they're understood by most people, and I think they seem fair and reasonable in how they've been written.
Okay.
But some people disagree, and that's why they come to us for a variance.
Variance. All right, it's fine.
Okay. Brent, anything you'd like to add to the list?
Nope.
Okay. So that was, Susan, any other thoughts on the code update issues? I think it's a broad enough category that absent something listed as a bullet
I'm
point
okay
doesn't
with-
mean it's not going to come back. Right.
Either way, we can discuss it or we can let it go. Either way.
Thank you. I think that was the list, right? And maybe I want to open it back up to, oh, is there? Oh, well, that was that page. I was checking out, sorry.
Recreation element update. This is an element update that looks like leverages Parks Master Plan update, which occurred in 2015, to make corresponding updates to the recreation element, conduct concurrently with updates to circulation and land use elements to ensure that the mobility network addresses recreational facilities and trails, along with accounting for recreational needs related to land use. There are things like the active transportation plan that does now exist, the map that prioritizes the active transportation plan. So I'm open for discussion.
I feel a little at a loss after hearing that description of what we're really doing in that category. I will say, I think I'm really proud of the city's trail network and their recreational spaces. And so I think they're really doing a good job of that. And I'm not sure what this is looking to correct or focus on, or other just to keep it a priority and keep doing a good job of it.
I think they just want us to take a glance at it and see if perhaps there are connections missing, linkages that we might recommend, for future.
I agree with Commissioner Surratt. However, isn't that the responsibility of one of the other commissions, whether the Parks and Rec or the Trails Commission? I'm a huge fan of this, but I also want to prioritize what they're responsible for and their recommendations to us versus doing their job for them.
I would agree. Brent, any thoughts?
I definitely agree with that.
Okay. So I'm hearing a general idea to remove that from our long-term goal? Head
Yes.
nods all around? Good.
Citywide noise ordinance, I think that speaks for itself. And I think Siri thought I was talking to it.
I have a question about that, because if you scroll up, noise ordinance is also in one of the others. Updates to noise standards in the zoning code update. What is the difference between those two?
There would be no difference.
Okay, so do we need to have a separate section for it then, if it's already included in the zoning code update?
I would maybe suggest we strike it from the, well, I don't care. really. Strike it from the upper one and just let it sit as a citywide noise ordinance. Frankly, I'm only concerned if they would stop the motorcycles from having no muffler. That's about the only
On the
issue I have at
101,
the moment.
No, I would agree with you. I think we strike it from the zoning code update and we leave it because I think noise is an issue. It was an issue for health and safety when some of the large projects came in terms of where their play areas were going to be and was it up against the setback or the other neighborhoods. So, and it comes up in alcohol permit requests. So it's a long-term perspective. I think it's something that we just have to make sure that we're aware of. So.
Okay. Collective agreement there.
Okay. Number 4, residential care zoning, general zoning code amendment to the zoning code to consider appropriate zoning for residential care facilities. It came up and then went silent on this issue. I listened to a 2018 work plan meeting, and I believe it was Tasha Berner Hovarth who was requesting a definition be added, and then the discussion ended at that.
And didn't we talk about residential care, the ordinance last year sometime?
And there was no
agenda?
movement on it.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Does residential care zoning codes cover rehab facilities and, for a common term, a transition house?
They have a separate definition.
But currently, a facility with 7 or more individuals can be in any of the R3 and higher zone, basically? Is that what's the current?
I believe they are allowed in residential zones. However, you have to be on a primary arterial road to be able to propose one.
I don't have a lot of background or understanding of what the issues would be to kind of champion this cause, but I'm willing to keep it on there if someone else feels strongly about it.
My issue is probably getting them to, the answer to your question is no, I don't have a problem. I do have probably some concerns over rehab facilities within an area and adjacency, but I think we have a code for that, but the code seems to be trumped by the ADA laws, which allow multiple units in residential neighborhoods, of which in Alevenheim there are 5 that are adjacent to each other, owned by one corporation, which, in my opinion, changes the character of the neighborhood.
So am I hearing that you would like to review that and not this?
That is correct. So I don't have a problem here, but I don't know if my suggestion goes on this list or not. Maybe it's just me having to be educated by staff. So I don't know if I want to put that on a long-term goal. Does staff have any indication of how many residential care facilities are in the city?
I do not have that information.
I would suggest taking this off the list.
Okay.
I don't feel like there's anybody really championing this particular item.
I do remember that we discussed when we had the facility on Manchester Preserve come up, or next to Manchester Preserve on Manchester Boulevard. I think that what I researched at that time was that it's a growing segment of the population, and we're going to be seeing more of these projects. So maybe that is why we're seeing it on the work plan. I don't know.
I would support removing it and making room for Bob's issue with transitional housing. I think if that's what the term was.
Yes, it's transitional, and it's transitional housing is one, and then secondarily, the zoning allowing for rehab facilities in residential neighborhoods, which there are quite a few.
Okay.
I'd support that too. Definitely should get out in front of that and
Okay.
not worry about something that seems to be under control.
So I think there is a consensus to remove this item. Is there a consensus as well to add the rehab and transitional housing? I'm hearing 3 people in favor. Chris and Susan? Okay. Does that make sense?
Yep,
Anna?
I wrote, remove and add transitional housing and zoning that allows rehab facilities in residential neighborhoods. So is it the amount that are allowed specifically?
Well, that's a great question. I guess it's probably a longer conversation, maybe the amount or the location to each other, how many people there. I believe there's some laws requiring separate staffs to be maintained at each of the facilities. Even if they're adjacent to each other, there has to be a doctor and a nurse at each facility, and such that, how that's enforced. So there's just probably a lot more to digest that I can take a responsibility and try to work with staff and come up with some ideas in terms of if it's in this code, if it's not in the code, so.
Yeah, and I know there's some state regulations too that are kind of out of our hands on some of these items.
Yes.
But if this is something that, that can be done, then perhaps it's one of those ad hoc committees if the commission wishes to do that.
At one point in the past, there was a house that was built on Fortuna Ranch Road when Councilman Ehlers was on the Planning Commission, and I think it was going to have 17 separate rooms. And that eventually did not happen, and eventually became a single-family residence with 17 rooms. But it's an issue that I think it could happen, my understanding, anywhere in the city. There's no code restrictions against it. You can, because of the state laws, so it could be anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
thank you for putting it on the list.
Sure.
Okay, to move on to the next one?
Yes, please.
Unpermitted accessory dwelling units ordinance, so that's now really covered under the accessory dwelling unit laws.
Okay. I'd remove it then. I believe the city went through a giant amnesty effort to get them permitted, the unpermitted ones. So at this point, I don't think it is a top priority or even a long-term priority.
Well, actually, I think it's a pretty big priority because of affordable housing being a big priority and that these ADUs often qualify as affordable housing. And I think there may be a lot of those out there that aren't documented. And if we can pick them up, it would boost our inventory of affordable housing. So I think it's a pretty high priority, actually. I know that when I lived in Venice, they grandfathered a bunch of these that were in our neighborhood, and I think it was for that reason. But they had to come up to code. So they had inspections, and they, for example, the plumbing and the electric and so on, a lot of them was substandard, had to be upgraded.
Yeah, I think that part of it is what is permitted now. I mean, they can come in and show that they've upgraded all the plumbing and the structure or whatever and get a permit for those ADUs. I think this item was being a little more laissez-faire to say if it's an unpermitted ADU, you can continue to have it, no questions asked. And I don't know that that's necessarily what we want to be doing.
Is that, your point about the grandfather ones in, is that expired, the ability to come in with an ADU that is, well, or a granny flat, but not registered? Is that still available? Or is that expired, the ability?
I don't know about an expiration.
So a few years ago, I don't know exactly, I'll say 2-3 years ago, there was a state law that indicated that a city had 5 years. It had, if there was existing unpermitted ADUs, the city could not enforce against that ADU unless the city made a finding that essentially that there were urgent health and safety concerns. But absent that, the city had to limit enforcement against them for a 5-year period, saying, hey, in 5 years, you need to bring it up to code, but for now, it's fine, kind of a thing. But that's still in the books, but, it's been a few years already.
The city did come up with an affordable unit policy early on when the ADU law didn't have this information before. But now the ADU law allows you to just bring up an accessory dwelling unit that's illegal. We have to allow it, and they just bring it up to code, building code. So there are already laws in place that require this. Yep.
So I'm hearing removal.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been done.
Okay.
Entertainment ordinance to regulate entertainment activities open to the public.
We don't have an ordinance for entertainment currently? We have, or is it just falling under noise ordinance, that kind of thing?
Falling under noise ordinance, we have entertainment licenses that are required for certain events. We have use permits for certain uses that, as part of their uses, have entertainment. There's various things.
There used to be a movie theater on El Camino Real and AMC that went under. Was that was that defined as entertainment? Obviously, it was in probably a commercial zone, but is that? I mean, maybe movies will come back. I don't know, but is that?
I believe theater has their own definition.
So we don't have a definition of entertainment, is what?
I'm not hearing,
That's what I was curious about.
yeah.
I don't know what entertainment activities
Okay.
means.
I'm not sensing that there's an issue with pop-up concerts or something happening in a park. I mean, I'm not sure what we're trying to prevent here.
Wasn't it restaurants that had dancing in their
Dancing?
alcohol permits?
Okay, so is that the noise ordinance then that is, I mean, it's too rowdy?
No, but I don't think, I think there was a restaurant along the 101 that starts with the letter R, and I believe that there was a limit that they couldn't have dancing. They could have music, but they couldn't have dancing. If there was an entertainment code, would we, somehow prohibit that? Anna, do you recall?
That's what came to my mind when
No,
I read
that's-
this entertainment. That's what came to my mind.
So through use permits, typically those places have alcohol and they require a use permit.
Right.
And we are able to condition through there, and we have things like, no live music, or, no dancing, or no ping pong table, or, whatever it is. So we have conditions in place that go towards that, but I'm not familiar with that specific case that you're referring to.
Which one?
Just taking it out.
I would
Yeah,
remove it.
this falls into the alcohol permits.
Yeah, this is taken care of elsewhere.
Taking
Okay.
those out.
I'd remove it then.
The next one, Cardiff Twin Home Lot Variance Requests. What had happened is in 2011, I think, don't quote me on that, but somewhere around that time frame, City Council did authorize for, people were coming in for variances because those lots are so unique and narrow and small. And so there's a certificate of compliance process in place that consolidates the lots so that those variances are not requested as much anymore. So you actually haven't seen them come before the commission. So that is what I can find on this item.
So this would be a single-family house bridging across a common lot line on a Cardiff lot, which is typically 2 lots.
Correct.
So it's to enable a single-family house, but not necessarily a wider, you could still do a twin home with a 0 lot line party wall?
Correct.
Because I think of those twin homes being largely an R11 zone? Is the R15 zone?
It was specific to the R15 zone where it was that the issue kept arising.
Okay.
Is this because the house, that the duplex, the wall is not on the lot line?
I think it has to do with the fact that there's these two very narrow lots, and some people just wanted to build a house on a wider lot.
Right.
Right? So they want to just basically combine them. And under a strict interpretation, because there was that property line, there was some discussion that, well, you have a setback from that property line, so that would prohibit you from building across it, even though you owned both
Lots.
properties.
Right.
So that aspect, I think, is a perfectly good cleanup, is that you let the homeowner build a single-family house and eliminate the central lot line, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, or you have to make them go through a lot line adjustment, what a pain in the neck that is, and move the lot line to make it a little skinny so you're not, I mean, that seems silly. You should be
My
able to-
first house in Cardiff was we built a twin home, and it was a house that bridged across the property line. I suppose some people are saying, why do I have to get rid of the center property line? It could just be a paper line, because my house now bridges across it, because I own
Right.
both sides.
Right,
But if they were ever to tear down the house, they would never be able to re-subdivide that lot, right? They would lose the whatever value of having two properties.
So has that been completed? That ordinance has been refreshed? Or is it still outstanding and we should allow that to happen?
Right.
Is that why it's
Anna,
on
could
here?
you
We haven't
remind us?
seen any lot variance requests for this specifically come through in years. So it seems to be no longer an issue. I don't want to speak for all, but we have not seen them come through in which we feel a code amendment is needed to address a specific issue. If I hear otherwise, I can report back to the Planning Commission on that.
So let me understand. Currently, what happens if someone wants to build up to their lot line, it's a variance request.
It depends on what they are constructing. So you could have a twin home and have a 0 lot line, but if you want to put a single family over the lot line, you have to remove the lot line.
I don't see a
So
reason to have this item on this list. I'd remove it.
Bob?
But based on what Anna just said, we should allow the applicant to build over the lot line and not have setbacks if the applicant owns both pieces of the property. So the code needs to be cleaned up to allow that to happen versus a variance. So we don't want a party wall. If I own both sides, I can build my house over the lot.
Right. I think, just to put a really fine point on it, they're allowed to build over it now if they'll combine the lots. What I hear you suggesting is that they should be allowed to build over the line and keep it as a line. So if they were ever to tear down the house in the future, they still
They'd have
own
two,
lots.
because now you're forcing them to collapse two separate lots.
Yeah.
Which now you have to go, I mean, I'm not an expert in the subdivision map act, but what a pain in the neck that would be to hire an attorney, get title, go to the county assessor and say, oh, I only own one lot now, it's not two anymore. I don't want to require, if they choose to do that, that's great. But I'd hate to require them by law if they own both houses, because maybe 30 years from now, they build a twin home. And now they can't because we've forced them, now they have to go subdivide the property. They didn't come back in front of us again.
I'm in agreement with you, Bob, and if there was other support, I would say we keep it on here. It's a long-term goal. It's not, truthfully, not likely to really come up quickly. But, to the fact that I don't think it's necessarily resolved the way I'd like to see it resolved, I'd keep it on there.
I do too, until we sit down with staff and come up with a resolution that possibly changes the code to allow flexibility to the applicant. I mean, it's property rights, and, if they own both halves, then why should we care?
If I may, they don't meet setbacks when they cross over a property line like that. And in the zone, you're allowed a twin home if you're allowed a 0 setback on one side if you have a twin home. And so it doesn't meet setbacks, so you have to ask for a variance for it. So you'd be universally saying, if you change the code, you'd be universally saying that you can put single-family homes over property lines, and then building code issues might arise from that as well.
Well, I think that's all the more reason to clarify the ordinance so that so that doesn't happen, and so that the setbacks, if the applicant is following the code and he wants to put a house, or they want to put a house over the property line, that the setbacks now apply to all four sides of the house, and, you know, the parking issues apply. But I just don't think that we have the responsibility to force a collapse of the lot.
Yeah, I would suggest that it's a current interpretation that the city wants to remove the lot lines, right? I mean, we could clarify the ordinance to say this is allowed to happen. In the 50s, they did it to every lot over there. They combined every lot and put a single-family house on them. And they didn't combine the lots, they just took two and put a house on them. So for what it's worth, I'd like to see it still be on the long-term plan.
I agree.
Any thoughts? This is a lot of Bob and Steve conversation.
Is there a possibility of abuse of it, though?
I think that would be a discussion we could have.
In terms of people wanting to build the zero lot line?
I think that would be a discussion we would have at the time that we were actually reviewing the ordinance as part of the cleanup.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
So-
fine.
Okay, I'm hearing that we'd keep it on there.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, is it just applicable to Cardiff?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Correct.
How about
Every lot
city?
in Levenheim.
Right.
That's where this condition exists.
Really? So it's only exists in the defined location?
Yes, if you look at the old 1920s maps,
Yeah.
they're all,
It wouldn't surprise me if there was one up on Neptune, because some of those houses were built in the 20s.
sure.
Possibly.
I don't think you're going to combine your 2-acre lots in Levenheim, if that's your concern.
But it could be a discussion to grow it if this becomes up on the list. The last one, bluff determination procedure. Create a more robust method to make bluff determinations. I believe that this, the way I interpreted this, I couldn't find much information on it, was having more of like a determination of where the bluff is along there, but staff doesn't advise that. It's right now the process is that the applicant has to hire a geotechnical professional, identify where the bluff edge is, then our geotechnical third-party reviewer goes to a site visit and agrees or disagrees and requests changes to it, and that's where the bluff determination is made, and then setbacks are established from that after our third-party geotechnical professional agrees to it.
It sounds pretty robust.
Yeah, I would remove it.
I think we should take this off.
Anna, what would be the definition of more robust? I mean, what was the intent here? If the code seems to work, let's just take it off.
Yeah, screw it. Yeah, please remove it. All right, is that the last one now? Okay.
That is the last one.
I did want to open it up to the commission. We've been through all of the items that have been on the list. Are there any items that we haven't discussed that you'd like to add to the list in any particular order, whether it's long-term, as time prevents, or priority, or current? Seeing none, going once, going twice? Okay. Susan, are you?
Go Susan. Go ahead, Susan. She has a list.
Susan?
I'm pretty good with it.
Okay, good.
And I apologize again to staff and the commissioners and the attendees for being late, and I apologize if I've missed this. But let's see. There seems to be I have some concerns when buy right projects who come to us on some developments, and we have code for EV chargers. I'm concerned about the safety of wood frame construction projects if everybody in the unit has an e-bike. It's a fire hazard, it's a risk, and I don't know if our code currently deals with the influx and the amount of e-bikes and lithium batteries that go with it. So one of the ones I would like to discuss is, when a developer comes in, we now have a code for how many EV chargers you have to have, the electric cars downstairs, but then people take their EV bikes upstairs, and there's been lots of fires in high-rise buildings in New York and Philadelphia where there's been bikes. So I'd like to talk about storage and responsibilities of property owners. It's an open coin here. I mean, everybody might have one, and that's great for mobility, but it's also a health and safety issue, especially if we go vertical on some of these projects. So it's a concern of mine.
Are you specifically discussing it as it relates to multifamily, the 4-story or the 3-story buildings? Are you saying for all structures in Encinitas? I mean, a single-family house?
That's a tough one. I mean, the single-family house is probably a wood frame, and it's probably in the garage where the plugs are. I'm sure they're not bringing it into their house. But when you're in a multi-story,
Just to put a little background, there's like 4 different levels of fire-resistive construction in wood framing. So your house is unrated.
right?
You can go to a 1-hour wall, then you can go to type 3, and then type 3 1 hour. So those taller buildings tend to have a lot
Higher
more
ratings for their
fire
demo.
ratings
Right.
than your typical house garage.
Does the city have any e-bike requirements or charging requirements under current codes?
Not in our municipal code.
But yet we have responsibilities for developers to put in EV chargers as part of their code compliance for their development permit that would meet our climate action plan. But-
That's state law.
That's state law.
The electric vehicle charging.
Okay.
And your concern is the batteries themselves, less so that they're charging a car there?
No, the cars are in the garage, and I guess under the building, it could explode, and, we still don't even know how to put out a car fire. I mean, it's tough right now. So I guess I just want to consider if people are going to be vertical in their buildings and they're putting explosive materials upstairs, whether the code comes maybe it's a 2-hour wall becomes a 3-hour wall. I just think we have to be considerate the fact that everybody has an e-bike. We've encouraged people to have electrical vehicles, and I think we have a responsibility to somehow treat them as, you don't allow a Tesla on the 5th floor of a building, and basically these e-bikes are Teslas, are just smaller. So it's a risk, and I think it's a health and safety risk.
My hesitation is that it seems like a highly technical determination about the level of hazard of the battery and the likelihood of fire and all of the rest of that. The California Building Code, based on the International Building Code, is very specific about hazardous materials and how they can be stored, and what different materials are classified in different hazard categories.
And is a lithium battery for an e-bike classified as a hazard material?
I haven't read that to know, but I would trust in these building code officials. That seems like it bridges maybe into more of the building code issue rather than the zoning ordinance issue.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Do we have mature tree ordinance on here somewhere?
Yes,
Yeah, it was at top.
yes, it's under current goals.
As is the native plant ordinance upstairs. What about, can I ask council, there's been some court rulings regarding impact fees. We're talking about our climate action plan, and my concern is when a couple of developments have come, they don't know where the bus stop is. So we're talking transit-oriented development. They didn't even know where the bus stop was. The Sage Canyon was one of those. Didn't know where the bus stop was. So they're building a density housing project. Is there a way that, as part of their compliance, that we have to have them contact, as part of the code compliance, that they have to contact, maybe not zoning, but code compliance, to contact NTCD and discuss and come back to us with an answer about, did they talk to them, can they put a bus stop, and who's responsible for put the bus stop in if they're going to drop 500 apartment units on a space? We have setbacks, why wouldn't we also talk to them about their transit obligation? And maybe that's an impact fee to contribute to transit, and that's something I want to ask council about, or is it a code issue, or is it a zoning issue?
If I may, we as staff can do better about routing projects to NCTD when there is in proximity to a bus stop. But all the standards, such as whether or not they want a shelter there or if it warrants a bus stop, would be under NCTD purview. But we can ensure that we are routing projects to them to provide their feedback and perhaps conditions of approval that they wish that the project be added to the project.
So does that go on here, or is that just something that we talk to staff about as part of their processing?
I feel like it's difficult because NCTD is kind of its own fiefdom and its own process for setting its bus schedules and its bus stops, and to condition a project that they have to have a bus stop.
No, I didn't say have to have a bus stop, but I want to understand when we're adding 1,000 units at the intersection of Encinitas Boulevard and Quail Garden, or 275 units at the intersection of Rancho Santa Fe Road and Encinitas Boulevard, and there isn't a bus stop, and the bus comes 3 days a week. We don't meet our climate action plan, we don't meet our VMT issues, and we're leaving ourselves exposed to everybody having to have a car. And I think there's lots of ordinances within the city and master plans within the city and mobility updates within the city, and here we are approving projects, and no one's asking about whether the person who lives there can even get to the grocery store without driving a car.
I kind of support where you're going, Bob, but and maybe I'm making a link that you're not, but I would say that seems like a mobility plan, like citywide. We ought to be encouraging more bus stops or encouraging more alternative methods of getting around. You may not make, I may be misunderstanding, but if it's being linked to specific projects, that's where I start to have an issue, because I feel like a lot of these R30 overlay zones, those were established by the city council whatever number of years ago, and some decision was made that density should go there.
Well, and I understand, however, there's always mistakes, and our job is to possibly make suggestions to clean up those mistakes. And if the city council didn't think about 1,000 units going on that location, or 275 units in Levenheim with no way out and no way to get to work, and a bus that comes once, 3 times a day, I think that we have an obligation under our climate action plan and our traffic mobility obligations to find out if that can change. And then, to me, I don't think it's any problem for the developer to pick up the phone and call NTCD and make sure that they respond back to the city and the constituents in the city to say, yeah, I talked to NTSD and they're not going to put a bus stop there. Fine. Right now, we don't have that obligation. And, when Sage Canyon goes in at 150 units in the middle of, and there's no bus, when we're talking about affordable housing and there's no park. So yeah, I do think that it's a part of our mobility plan, but I do think it's not a problem for them to be conditioned to let us know how they're dealing with our mobility problems. Because traffic is an issue and we're trying to reduce traffic. So why not find out how they can help reduce traffic if they're adding 150 homes times 4 people? That's 450, 600 people.
Yeah, I think maybe you and I are disagreeing about whose bucket
Who's
it's in.
responsible for
Right.
it? I want it to be part of the applicant, so yeah, it's a code. I understand that's part of the mobility plan, and they should ask that, and they should request it. But I think it should be a code responsibility for the developer who's going to put in a something to let us know that they've asked that question of the Regional Transportation Board, and they've said, we don't have enough rider use for that space. That's fine. I can't tell NTCD what to do, but I do think the developer has an obligation to conform to our mobility plan and conform to our climate action plan. And that's what all these other setbacks and tree ordinances that we're going to impose, why not impose the ability to check off the box?
I could add it to the zoning code update list if this is a consensus to look at it.
I don't know if we have a consensus, but that would be fine.
Just to open it up a little broader then to the other commissioners, any thoughts that you'd like to contribute to that?
Sounds like a reasonable thing to consider.
I think it's okay to be on there, but I don't know really what the outcome is going to be and to what end. I mean, it's just forcing someone to make a phone call and then report back to us. Is that what you? Because no developer's going to be able to get NCTD to make a change to their bus schedule or to their routes based.
Maybe NTSD
on-
doesn't know that we're building 1,000 units with 3,000 people at the intersection of Quail Gardens until you tell them. So I think that as a regional transportation authority, they should be aware of the developments in their community, and they should be able to respond to them. If they're not aware of it, then they might not respond to it. So how do we know unless we tell them? Someone has to be proactive, and I think if our code requires it, then they have to be proactive. Yeah, I get it. NTCD might not be responsive, but it takes 18 months to process these processes. That's plenty of time for somebody to make a phone call and try to get some answers.
I think we're getting into specifics of the debate. What I'm hearing is that it's important enough to me on one side and you on the opposite, but it's the same issue. So we should discuss the issue. And so I'd be supportive of adding it to the work plan. And then at that time, we can hash out, is it the developer, is it the city who talks to NCTD?
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Is the way I put it in here, under the zoning code update, NCTD coordination on stance of bus stop in project vicinity? Does that cover?
Yes. The other question I had for council was regarding the impact fees, and where do we stand as a city, or where is the current law regarding an impact fee? Are we allowed to impose impact fees?
So there was a Supreme Court case that came down maybe a month ago, Sheets versus County of El Dorado. A lot of paper and thought has been put into that, but I don't think it changes too much as far as what the city can and cannot do. The main change that it made was historically in California, the rule was if a fee was adopted legislatively, in other words, across the board, everybody in the city must always pay X dollars if you build Y amount of square footage. Okay, that applies to every project. We're not treating you differently than anybody else. So if it's adopted legislatively, then it was extremely difficult to challenge. Essentially, if the city was being completely unreasonable, then you could challenge it. Now the Supreme Court said, no, actually, you don't get that deference. Rather, somebody has the right to challenge the city to say, actually, as applied to me, that fee is unreasonable. That doesn't really change whether we're allowed to have fees. It just means it might be, as applied to individuals, there might be a greater likelihood that the city would not be able to apply a particular fee to a particular situation. But that's a long way of saying I don't think much has changed. It's just, it may be a little more difficult for the city to always win.
And we have mitigation impact fees related to parks, trails, sewer mitigation, traffic mitigation. Those are all required, and there's certain projects like parks and trails fees are all new residential units are applied to, as well as sewer and traffic mitigation fees. And then non-residential have the sewer and traffic mitigation fees. So those are all required developments today, and and we are able to collect those.
Including housing element and by right projects?
That is correct.
If a new fee were to be introduced, that come from city council?
It would.
Or to start here and go to city council?
It would start from city council. I believe because it's a revenue source and determination, it would come from city council.
Okay.
So
Did I miss a-
Anna, a question for you. I'm looking at, our document that's attached here, and I just can't find that mature tree ordinance anywhere on it.
Yes, it's in the working document that I have up here. Let's go all the way. So I'll just show you up here, we're in the current goals section. So this is what I will be bringing back for adoption of resolution. And mature tree is number 10.
Okay, so it's a different document. It's been
Correct.
edited. Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Is there a gray water ordinance for commercial properties?
Yeah, we have gray water ordinance, and it's based on the amount of landscaping any project proposes.
What about existing projects? So if
If they-
someone has an existing shopping center, they're going to make changes, they'll become compliant with current codes, and if landscaping is required, then the gray water will be required?
Yes, there's a certain threshold of modification, square footage modification of landscaping that triggers the requirement, that code requirement, and then gray water would be looked at that time.
And the pink pipe they're plumbed in the code. And when the pink pipe is available, they're required to use it?
You're referring to recycled purple piping?
Yes.
Yes. That comes from the water district, and projects are conditioned and required, new developments are required to pre-plumb it if it's not available, so that they can connect when it does become available. But if it is available, they do require recycled water.
So in the future, if a development gets completed, they basically tee out to the street with the purple pipe. And then once the purple pipe is installed sometime in the future, are they required under their permit to make the connection? Or is it, how
That
do we
is-
ever know?
Yeah, that's my understanding. I believe that would be all from the water district themselves to regulate that. I'm unfamiliar with, timing of when it's available, if they alert them and then they require it. I don't know those details.
Okay, so it's not a city. Our code is you have to plumb for it, but we can't enforce the connection. That's the water district. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the mature tree ordinance. I don't like the TBD. I would like to see a date for
Ye-
like 2024 to 2025, perhaps. Is there a reason why we couldn't have that date? Because it seems to me this is not a cost item. It's
Right.
policy.
Yes, so I still need to update this whole section here. So this is a working document. Some of these are older, but they need to be updated. So I will be obtaining that information from staff that have been working with City Council to input that information.
I appreciate that. I'm working now.
But
I'm
ju-
working in real time.
Okay, but to be
So I
clear
would really
about,
like to see it have a date of 2024 to 2025. I don't know if anybody else sees that as important, but for me, carbon sequestration is an important issue, and if we can have a mature tree ordinance this year instead of next year, we're saving more sooner,
to be-
potentially.
just to clarify the process we're doing tonight, Anna will take this away with our comments and come back to us with the document, like whatever we leave tonight, it's going to come back to us for a vote and a review before it goes to the city council or goes beyond this, right? So as a working session, this is her to get a draft down. If that date is important to you, when it comes back, we can check to see that that date is there or what date has been added.
Well, I'm sorry, I thought we were working on it now, as far as our input
Well, I
to the
think,
work plan. This is the plan, right? Work plan.
yes, so I think Anna can make that note that that date is important, but this will come back to, like, once we're done tonight, it's not that we're not going to see this again. We still have to read through what she creates as the final document. Okay.
But I
I'd
do
just
have
like
your
it to be as specific as possible.
Yep. And I have that note here on the side to the desire for the 2024-2025 to be input.
Thank you so much.
My last one is a point of clarification from Anna. When a project is completed and they were required to put in 50% native trees and 12 chargers and all the different things that are compliant, how is that final C of O signed off on? Does the developer have the onus of being liable for making a statement that he or she or they have completed the project per the plans?
We conduct inspections. Various departments have their inspections, so planning specifically for landscaping would do their inspection. And then especially with projects that are larger and have more landscaping on there, and the requirement that has been added on about the 50% native, we now, since then, so it's been quite some time, we've requested that their landscape professional certify that the plan has been constructed, the site has been constructed per plan.
Is it just for landscaping, or is there any other liability or onus of the developer to make a statement that they have complied with the city, their permits, then they have built the buildings or structures as indicated on the plans?
There's nothing specific that occurs. However, all of the plans are stamped by licensed professionals. And so if anything were to ever not be consistent with that, they would be responsible to ensure that it's changed so that it is in compliance with that, or go through the proper channels of changing their permit.
So the city's responsible for cross-checking the plans to make sure that they're built, and the city's staff or the engineers or the third parties that the city engages are the ones who are the authority to say that the development is built per the permit, per the plans, per the resolution?
We have inspectors we have engineering inspectors, building inspectors, and then the planner that goes to look for the planning issues. But specific to landscaping, we require the developer to pay for a landscape professional to certify the landscaping.
Are you familiar with any city where the developer is required to make a statement that would have liability for them to have built the project per the permit, per the resolution?
I'm not familiar with that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Anyone else with additional items to add? Susan? No? Okay, thank you. I think we have covered that. So, Anna, you've got your feedback. You will come back to us with at a future date with a new document that represents the current plan, and we'll be able to review that, and we'll take an action at that time. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I will move us on to item 9, future agenda items added by the planning commissioners. Anyone would like to add a future agenda item?
I think I saw something about, I don't know if this is an agenda item, but the El Camino Real specific plan meeting is coming up. Does that become an item, or is that just something we talk about? I think Susan's been going.
I think it's not, I'm not sure what the action item that we want to add,
not an action
but I
item.
think Susan has been really great about updating us after the fact of those.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was an official item.
Okay. That could come into this category. Item 10 now, planning commissioner reports. Any planning commission
As a matter of
reports?
fact, June 11th, we'll be having workshop number 3 from 6 to 8 at the library for that El Camino Real corridor specific plan. Open to the public.
And just to clarify, because it clarified for me a little earlier today, but Susan has been attending those meetings as a representative of the commission, but any commissioner is allowed to attend as a volunteer, as a citizen of the city.
Yeah, I
Right.
think it's open to anyone.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to ask Commissioner Surratt, Susie, you had been attending the native plant seminars with the city council members. Can you share with us any insights? Once again, another meeting that you've attended, but something that will come before us.
As far as I know, we haven't had one for, I don't know when the last one was. Maybe it was in the fall or summer, last summer. It's been quite a while.
I thought you and Sally had met with Bruce and Joy and kind of gone through the native plant committee that you were part of.
That was not as a planning commissioner.
Oh,
Are
not,
you
not as,
referring-
right, okay, so not as a planning commissioner, got it, okay.
Are you referring to the mature tree ordinance or native plant ordinance?
I think there's been some working committees on the native plant
Okay.
ordinance, and I thought Susie was attending, so I was just going to get your,
Kevin Doyle and I were on a task force, but I believe that we made recommendations at that time as a task force, as a group, not just Kevin and I. And that went forward to council as far as I know. Yeah.
Okay, any other reports? Seeing none, I'll move on to secretary reports.
Yes, thank you. I was going to mention the June 11th, so thank you so much about the El Camino Real Specific Plan Workshop. In addition to that meeting, there is going to be a joint Planning Commission and City Council meeting on June 26th, 3:30 p.m. in the council chambers, also related to the El Camino Real Specific Plan. So that one is going to be, you should be getting an invite shortly on that. And then my other item, any questions on that? Okay. My other item is just to let you know, I believe you were all aware that the Sage Canyon Housing Element Site Project withdrew their application, and so they have recently submitted a new application. So that we just received it, and it's going to be routed and under review. So.
I was mistaken, it was the community climate action plan meetings, not the native plan, so I misspoke.
And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I will adjourn the meeting. We've covered it all. Thank you very much. We'll see you at the next meeting regularly scheduled for June 6th, 6 p.m. Thank you.